I stared down at the plate they slid in front of me, cold turkey scraps, stiff mashed potatoes. "Hope you don't mind leftovers," my daughter smirked, while the others burst into laughter. Christmas lights twinkled above, cruel against the chill settling in my chest. My own family, treating me like I was nothing. I swallowed my pride with every cold bite. But what they didn't know was that I'd already served something colder, the frozen bank accounts they depended on. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The roast ham glistened under the chandelier, its honeyed crust steaming as Jason carved thick, juicy slices onto Monica's bone-white china. Ellie sat at the far end of the long farmhouse table, next to an artificial poinsettia centerpiece and a flickering peppermint-scented candle. Her plate was already there when she sat down. Lukewarm turkey scraps, congealed green beans, and what looked like 3-day-old mashed potatoes crusted at the edges. Jason glanced her way as he poured gravy over his own heaping plate. "You don't mind, right, Mom?" His tone was light, almost performative, like a sitcom dad tossing out a punchline. "Figured you'd appreciate a little holiday fridge clean out." Monica didn't even bother to look up from her cranberry mocktail. "Mom's used to scraps," she said, tapping her phone with a manicured nail. "She lived on hospital cafeteria food for decades." Ellie stared down at her plate, then at the swirling steam rising from everyone else's meals. The room smelled like cinnamon and garlic and perfectly buttered rolls, none of which had made it to her end of the table. Her mouth was dry. Her stomach, though empty, felt heavy. She gave a polite smile, the kind that cracked just enough to pass for grace. "Of course. Waste not, want not." Jason laughed, then turned his attention to his twin daughters, chattering about new iPads and matching boots. Monica snapped photos of the centerpiece while her golden retriever, Diesel, lounged beside the fire in a custom Christmas sweater. The stockings above the stone mantel read, "Jason, Monica, Emma, Sophie," and then, far to the side, in smaller print on a limp gray stocking, "Mom." No one asked if she wanted cider. No one passed her the rolls. Ellie pushed her cold beans around with a fork, the metal scraping against porcelain in the quiet. Across the room, the family's Christmas tree blinked with synchronized LED lights, choreographed, impersonal, perfect, the kind of perfection that left no space for warmth. She tuned them out. The laughter, the Christmas playlist, the clinking glasses. She reached into her handbag under the table, brushing her fingers over the envelope she'd brought. Holiday cards with crisp $100 bills tucked inside. She had signed them, "With love, Mom." She left them in her bag. Later that night, Ellie walked into her own kitchen, smaller, older, but warm. The heater hummed softly, and a faint scent of pine clung to the windowsill where she'd placed a sprig from her own tree, the real one she bought each year, even if it was just for her. She opened the fridge. Inside, a foil-covered casserole dish waited. Cheesy scalloped potatoes she'd made the day before, just in case. She wasn't hungry anymore. The landline rang, shrill against the stillness. She picked it up. "Hello? Ellie?" Harvey's voice boomed through the receiver like a gust of Midwest wind. "So, how was the royal banquet?" Ellie sat slowly, curling the phone cord around her fingers. "They served me leftovers, Harv." A pause. "You serious?" "Cold ones. Out of Tupperware." Another pause. "That's hell, that's something else." Ellie exhaled. "I didn't say a word. Just sat there. Wish I'd been there. I'd have flipped the damn table." Ellie allowed herself a dry laugh. "No, you wouldn't. You'd have eaten the potatoes, then insulted the gravy." He chuckled, then softened. "You okay?" She stared at her untouched casserole. "I will be." Outside, snow began to fall, soft, steady, blanketing the quiet street in silver silence. Ellie stood, slowly, and pulled the curtain aside. Across the cul-de-sac, lights blinked in her neighbors' windows, families gathering by fires, children laughing, no gray stockings or cold plates in sight. She reached into her purse, pulled out the crisp holiday cards, and fed them one by one into the fireplace. The flames curled around them without hesitation. Then she walked to the cabinet, pulled out her folders, bank papers, old deeds, insurance forms, and laid them on the kitchen table, smoothing the corners with a practiced hand. Her phone buzzed again. Jason. She let it ring. The kitchen was silent except for the low rumble of the furnace and the gentle tick of the wall clock. Ellie sat at the table in her robe, sleeves rolled up, a mug of lukewarm tea forgotten beside a stack of folders. The edges of her fingers were ink-smudged from leafing through old statements, her breath fogging lightly against the cold windowpane beside her. The snow outside had stopped. Her street lay muffled under a thick blanket of white, undisturbed except for a pair of squirrel tracks darting toward the neighbor's bird feeder. Inside, however, something darker churned. Ellie flipped open her checkbook ledger with the efficiency of a retired nurse who'd once managed entire floors of chaos. The numbers stared back with sterile precision. $1,200. Consulting fee. J. Grant, LLC. $900. Supply advance. J. Grant, LLC. $450. Office lease, partial payment. She hadn't written those checks, but they had cleared, directly from her main account. She narrowed her eyes. A post-it she'd stuck to the edge of her statement months ago now seemed almost mocking. Let Jason help with banking, less to worry about. Ellie slowly stood and walked to her file cabinet, pulling out the bank documents she'd signed after her hip surgery the year before. Pages rustled, then stopped. There it was. Authorized cosigner, Jason T. Grant. She stared at the signature box, her own handwriting fluid but rushed. That had been just after her surgery, when the pain pills blurred details and Jason had spoken in that soothing voice he reserved for clients and elderly women, her jaw set. She sat back down, pulled the statement closer, and began circling transactions in red ink, withdrawals that lined up with the kind of vague expenses Jason always bragged about: business growth, client dinners, investment lunches. Then her eyes stopped on one. $3,100. Deposit to personal brokerage account. A sound escaped her, small and bitter, half a breath, half a growl. She pushed her chair back and reached for the cordless phone. The buttons clicked beneath her fingers with the force of someone who wasn't about to ask for answers, someone who was already rewriting the narrative. "Mornin', Ellie," came a warm voice on the third ring. "It's Maya." "Maya," Ellie said, managing to sound steady. "I hope I'm not interrupting your holiday." "Not at all. Slow day here at the branch. What's up?" "I need you to check something for me. Privately." There was a pause, then, "Sure. What do you need?" "I'm looking at my December statements. I didn't approve a single withdrawal this month, but there's been over $8,000 moved out." Ellie heard typing, then a short intake of breath. "Okay. I see what you're talking about. One moment. Let me pull up the authorization trail." Ellie gripped the phone tighter. Her knuckles paled. "Looks like Jason Grant executed the transfers. He's listed as a co-signer." "I know," Ellie said coldly. "I just remembered." Maya exhaled slowly. "Ellie, I hate to say this, but these weren't small one-offs. Some of these go back a few months. Do you want me to print a full report for you?" "I want that. And I want you to flag every transaction tied to his name from now on." "You got it," Maya said firmly. "I'll prep it today. And I'm sorry. I remember you from the hospital, Ellie. You were always the nurse who stayed late, the one who brought coffee to the janitor. You don't deserve this." Ellie blinked. That detail, so specific, shook her more than Jason's betrayal. "Thanks, Maya. I'll come by tomorrow." She hung up and stared at the table, her tea now ice cold. Then she reached into her drawer, pulled out a yellow legal pad, and began writing. "Freeze access. Remove cosigner. Name successor trustee." Each word carved into the paper with hard, deliberate strokes. From the drawer, she retrieved her old rubber stamp set, the one she used back when she handled patient discharges. She thumbed through it, then slammed down a red stamp on the top of the page. URGENT. The bowling alley cafe hadn't changed in years. The orange booths still squeaked when you slid in. The Formica tables bore tiny chips around the corners, and the air held a mix of burnt coffee, melted ice, and someone's stale cinnamon gum wedged beneath a table. It was a place where no one asked questions and no one talked politics, and Ellie had always appreciated that kind of silence. Harvey was already seated at their usual booth, peeling the paper off a blueberry muffin like it owed him money. His winter parka was draped across the seat beside him, and his knit Cleveland Browns hat sat slightly crooked on his bald head. Ellie slid into the booth across from him, tugging off her gloves and setting her tote bag beside her. She looked more alert than she had the night before, still tired, still wound tight, but now with an edge in her eyes that hadn't been there at Christmas dinner. "Morning," she said. Harvey took one look at her face and set the muffin down. "That's not a social morning. That's a let's ruin someone's life morning. I found out what Jason's been doing with my bank account," she said without fanfare. Harvey tilted his head. "You mean besides treating you like an afterthought?" Ellie opened her tote bag and pulled out a slim folder. She passed it across the table and waited while he flipped it open, his eyes scanning quickly. Red pens circled lines on every statement, withdrawals labeled as consulting fees, business advances, vague office reimbursements. "He's been bleeding me dry," Ellie said quietly. "Over $8,000 since October." Harvey let out a low whistle, then leaned back in the booth. "Well, damn. You think he was planning to tell you before or after he left you with $10 and a shoebox of broken ornaments?" "I trusted him to help while I recovered from surgery," she said, her voice steady but low. "I signed the co-signer form while I was still on pain meds. I didn't think he'd turn around and rob me in slow motion." Harvey's face tightened. "You need to cut him off. Now freeze him out, just like they froze your dinner plate." That made Ellie crack a small, grim smile. "That's exactly what I plan to do." She reached into her bag again and pulled out 2 more items, a legal pad covered in notes and a plain manila envelope. She laid them both on the table between them. "I've got the account numbers, pension paperwork, house deed, everything. Claire Abbott, an estate lawyer I used to know from the hospital board. She's meeting me tomorrow. We're restructuring everything. Jason's name comes off. Permanently." Harvey didn't say anything for a few seconds. He looked at her, long and full on, the way someone does when they realize a person they thought was calm has been sharpening knives in the dark. "You're not just reacting," he said finally. "You're going strategic." "I've spent my entire life organizing chaos," Ellie replied. "Hospitals, patients, families on their worst days. You think I can't handle one greedy son?" Harvey chuckled, but it was the kind of laugh that carried a current beneath it. He was proud of her, and furious on her behalf. She took a sip of her coffee. Burnt, bitter, perfect for the mood. Just then, her phone buzzed on the table. She didn't need to look to know who it was, but she did anyway. Sure enough, Jason. The message was short. "Don't forget to send the property tax check. We're behind again. Thanks." She showed the screen to Harvey. He snorted. "The nerve. Man's got his hand halfway down your pocket and still asking for more." Ellie didn't respond. Instead, she locked the phone, dropped it back into her purse, and took another slow sip of coffee. Her silence wasn't passive. It was focused. "I'm going to ask Claire to create a trust," she said, "with Harvey Klein as the successor trustee." Harvey sat up a little straighter. "You sure?" She looked him straight in the eye. "I trust you more than I trust my own blood." That silenced him. He nodded once with more weight than words could carry. Outside, the snow was beginning to melt under weak winter sun. Cars splashed through slush on the nearby road. Inside, at their tiny booth, something old and tired was being replaced with something sharper. A gray curtain of snow still hung in the air as Ellie pulled into the lot, the frozen surface of Lake Erie barely visible through the windshield wipers ticking rhythmically against her view. The lake, like everything else today, was silent and steel-colored. It matched her mood. Claire Abbott's office was nestled in a small Tudor-style cottage tucked off the main road by the marina. The sign outside was discreet, just her name in dark green serif with no frills and no slogans. That's what Ellie had liked about her when they first met back in the hospital boardroom days. Claire had the warmth of a Midwest librarian, but beneath it, a litigator's mind and a zero-bullshit threshold. Inside, the office was warm and quiet, filled with low bookcases, framed degrees, and the faint smell of wood polish and peppermint tea, a space that knew how to keep secrets. Claire looked up from her desk as Ellie entered. "Ellie," she said, standing and extending a hand with both respect and genuine affection. "It's been too long." Ellie unwrapped her scarf, dusted snow off her sleeves, and gave a tired smile. "I've had better Decembers." Claire nodded and gestured to the leather armchair across from her desk. "Tea? I just made a fresh pot." "Only if it's strong." Claire poured from a ceramic teapot into 2 mismatched mugs. "So," she said, settling back behind her desk, "what brings you in the week after Christmas?" Ellie folded her hands in her lap. "I need to protect what's mine. Quietly, permanently, and with no wiggle room." Claire set down her cup, her demeanor shifting. Less social now, more surgical. "Talk to me." Ellie took a slow breath. "My son Jason's been siphoning money out of my account. Thousands. I made him co-signer when I was recovering from surgery. I didn't know how bad it was until I looked. Maya at the credit union confirmed it. He didn't even try to hide it, said it was for business. Then he had the nerve to ask me for the property tax check, right after Christmas, right after feeding me cold leftovers like I was something the cat dragged in." Claire didn't interrupt. She just listened, her sharp eyes steady behind her thin, wire-rimmed glasses. "I want him removed from everything," Ellie continued. "Accounts, deeds, medical proxies, and I want to put what I do have into a trust. Harvey Klein, my friend from the bowling league, he's the only one I trust to manage it if something happens to me." Claire opened a drawer and pulled out a green file folder. "You want a revocable living trust. You retain full control while you're alive, and if anything happens, Harvey becomes trustee and executes your wishes. We'll remove Jason as co-signer and write clauses that make it contest-proof." Ellie nodded. "That's exactly what I need." Claire slid the folder in front of her and opened it to the signature pages. "I've already got most of your basic information from years ago. I'll need you to initial here. This removes Jason's authorization from the bank accounts." Ellie read the line 3 times before lifting the pen. Her hand trembled slightly, not from doubt, but from the magnitude of the moment. The pen scratched across the paper with deliberate strokes, and when she set it down, she looked different. Straight, quieter, but resolved. Claire flipped the next page. "This one creates the trust. You'll remain trustee. Harvey will be secondary. The assets listed here will all be protected under it. If Jason or anyone else tries to contest it, they'll be locked out unless they want to pay a litigator 10 times what they're hoping to steal." Ellie signed again. This time there was no hesitation. Claire stood and walked the documents to her scanner. As the light slid across each page, Ellie sipped her tea, letting the warmth sit on her tongue for a moment before swallowing. Her chest felt lighter. Not empty, just reclaimed. "Filed," Claire said, returning to her desk. "Your accounts will update within 48 hours. The credit union will receive authorization to remove Jason. I'll also send Maya a copy to expedite things on her end." Ellie exhaled and leaned back in her chair. "Thank you, Claire." "Don't thank me," Claire said softly. "Just don't feel guilty. Men like Jason count on women like you hesitating." Ellie gave a small, knowing smile. "He doesn't know me as well as he thinks." The knock came just as Ellie was removing a tray of oatmeal cookies from the oven. 3 sharp raps, confident, practiced, followed by the shuffle of boots on the porch. She didn't need to check the peephole to know who it was. Jason always knocked like he owned the door. She set the tray on the counter, adjusted her cardigan, and opened the front door. There they were, Jason in his camel-colored wool coat, phone in hand, and Monica, bundled in a white puffer jacket, oversized sunglasses perched on her head like a misplaced tiara. "Hey, Mom," Jason said, stepping past her without waiting for an invitation. "Smells like cookies in here. Are they the kind with raisins?" Monica followed more slowly, wrinkling her nose as she stepped onto the hardwood floor. "Still no entryway rug, huh?" she said, brushing invisible lint off her leggings. "Slippery floors are a lawsuit waiting to happen." Ellie shut the door gently behind them and turned with a polite smile. "I find welcome mats just collect dirt." She walked back to the kitchen, placing 2 mismatched mugs on the table. The house was modest, 2 bedrooms, a galley kitchen, original wood trim, but spotless and warmly lit, filled with the faint scent of cinnamon and clean linen. It didn't need to impress anyone. It wasn't a showroom. Jason settled into the chair across from her, drumming his fingers lightly on the table. So, I've been meaning to ask. He flashed that tight-lipped grin he used with clients, the one that looked professional until it didn't. You've still got that IRA, right? And your pension's still kicking in? Ellie stirred sugar into one of the mugs, slowly. Yes, she said, handing it to him without blinking. Both are doing just fine. Jason nodded as if that confirmed something for him. Good, good, just thinking long-term, you know. It's nice to know you'll be taken care of. And eventually, well, we'll make sure everything transitions smoothly. Monica snorted, letting her gaze wander across the room. Transitions smoothly, she repeated under her breath, then rolled her eyes. We're talking about a house with wicker coasters and cable TV, Jason. There's not exactly an estate to manage. Jason shot her a look, but she ignored it and turned to Ellie. Honestly, you should have let us help you update this place years ago. We could have brought in a designer, maybe had someone repaint the kitchen. It's very beige. Ellie refilled her own mug and sat down across from them, folding her hands around the warm ceramic. Beige is easy on the eyes, she said calmly. Some people prefer comfort over flash. Jason leaned in slightly. Don't get us wrong, Mom. We're not trying to judge. We just want to be prepared, you know? For the future. For what comes next. She sipped her tea, her expression unreadable. I've already taken steps to make sure everything is in order. Jason smiled too quickly. That's great. Just let us know if you need help with any of the... The front door creaked open before he could finish. Harvey stepped inside, brushing snow off his coat, a folded envelope tucked under one arm. Afternoon, folks, he said, his voice casual but firm. Jason stiffened in his chair. Harvey, didn't know you were coming by? Harvey smiled thinly. Didn't know you were here either. Monica gave him a once-over. Isn't this cozy? She murmured, crossing one leg over the other. The Senior Bowling League reunion. Ellie stood to greet him and took the envelope from his hand. Thanks for bringing this. You want some tea? Wouldn't say no, Harvey said, eyes never leaving Jason. The tension thickened as Ellie poured a third cup. Jason tried to keep his voice light. So, what's this? Some kind of secret meeting? You two planning a bank heist? Harvey gave a short laugh. Nothing criminal, just making sure Ellie's paperwork's airtight. Jason froze for a half second before recovering. Oh, sure. Yeah, always smart to be prepared. Harvey sat beside Ellie and stirred his tea. That's the idea. Ellie stood at her kitchen sink, drying the same teacup she'd used during Jason and Monica's visit. The words still echoed, not loud, but sharp. We'll redo everything once you're gone. It hadn't felt like a threat. It had felt like a plan already in motion. But Ellie hadn't reacted. She hadn't flinched, not in front of them. Now, alone in her house, with only the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the soft hiss of the heater in the vents, she allowed herself a moment. One breath, one long, steadying exhale. That was enough. The phone rang. She didn't need caller ID to recognize the voice when she answered. It's Harvey, he said, his tone softer now than it had been 2 days ago. You holding up okay? I'm fine, she said, and meant it. They're still rattling around in my head, but I'm fine. He paused. You didn't say a word to them. They weren't looking for conversation, she said. They came to posture, to pretend this house was already theirs. I've seen toddlers with more self-awareness, he muttered. Then, after a beat, they're blind to what's coming, Elle. That's the part that worries me least, she said, setting the cup gently on the drying rack. Let them stay blind. I want the look on their faces to be genuine. There was a pause on the other end. Then Harvey let out a low whistle. You've got steel in your spine. I just ran out of apologies. They hung up, and Ellie grabbed her coat, scarf, and the small blue folder Claire had handed her the day before. The air outside was colder than forecasted, sharp with lake wind and tinged with the metallic scent of salt spread along the sidewalks. She didn't mind. The cold was bracing, clean, honest. At the credit union, the doors opened with a gentle chime. Inside, Maya stood behind the front counter, her face lighting up as soon as she saw Ellie. Come on back, she said, waving her past the waiting chairs. You'll want some privacy. They settled into Maya's office, a tidy little room with a photo of her daughter in a softball uniform and a potted ivy winding along the window. "I've been keeping an eye on your accounts like we discussed," Maya said, opening a screen on her monitor. "You're now the sole account holder on everything we flagged. Jason's name has been scrubbed. Access revoked. Notifications rerouted. It's airtight." Ellie nodded, letting the words settle. "And the trust registration?" "Processed," Maya confirmed. "Everything tied directly to it now, and just for peace of mind, I added dual authentication on transfers above 500. No one's slipping past this system." Ellie smiled, not wide but deeply. "Thank you, Maya." Maya leaned forward. "You did what so many people don't. You saw what was happening and acted. That's not weakness, Ellie. That's power." Later that afternoon, Ellie sat across from Harvey at their usual booth in the bowling alley cafe. A half-eaten slice of cherry pie sat in front of her, the filling still warm, the crust flaking perfectly under her fork. She wasn't hungry, not really, but this wasn't about appetite. It was about reward. Harvey finished his second bite and raised an eyebrow. "You gonna eat that, or just admire it like a painting?" Ellie leaned back, her smile faint but real. "I'm letting it settle. Tastes better when you know you earned it." Just then, her phone vibrated against the laminate table. She picked it up, glanced at the screen, and showed it to Harvey. "Jason." She put it on speaker and set it down. His voice, when it came through, was barely controlled. "Mom, you've made a mistake. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't how families handle things. You're putting everything at risk. Monica's furious. I'm trying to be reasonable, but you need to call me back. Now." The line went dead. Ellie locked the phone without speaking. Harvey whistled again. "He's panicking." "He should be," Ellie said. As she tucked the phone away, another buzz lit up the screen. This time, it was a notification from a social media post. She didn't need to open it to know the tone, but she did anyway. Monica's post was short, public. "Ungrateful parents are the worst. You give them everything, and they act like you're the enemy." Harvey leaned over, reading it upside down. Classy. Ellie deleted the notification, then returned her attention to the pie. "I'm not the enemy," she said softly. "I'm the one who finally learned the rules of their game." The sky over Lake Erie was gunmetal gray again, the kind of winter ceiling that pressed down on the city like a held breath. Inside her office, Claire Abbott wore a fleece vest over her blouse, her space heater humming steadily beneath the desk. The windows were fogged from the contrast of cold glass and warm air, making the lake view feel like a painting seen through a memory. Ellie sat across from her, hands folded neatly in her lap, watching as Claire clicked through a series of property records on her screen. "You're all set," Claire said, scrolling one last time before leaning back. "House deeds been transferred into the trust, tax records updated, beneficiary clauses finalized, everything tied up tighter than a drum." "And Jason?" Ellie asked, her voice calm, deliberate. Claire shook her head. "He's legally removed. No access. No challenge without triggering a full review. And trust me, any attempt to contest this would cost him more than he'd hoped to recover. He's officially a stranger in the eyes of the estate." Ellie didn't smile exactly, but her shoulders relaxed by a degree. "Good," she said. "Then it's done." Claire gave her a look, a quiet, approving one. "You've been thorough. Not many people have the foresight to move before the damage is irreversible." "I used to manage night shifts at Mercy General," Ellie replied, her gaze drifting to the fogged window. "The trick was always catching things before they spiraled. A bad wound, a panicked family, a nurse on the verge of snapping. If you wait too long, all you're left with is cleanup." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a wrapped chocolate bar she'd picked up from the cafe downstairs. Placing it on Claire's desk, she said, "You've made this easier than I expected." Claire picked it up, turned it over, and smiled. "You didn't have to." "I know," Ellie replied. "That's why I did." Later that afternoon, the house was quiet again. The street outside was lined with trash bins from the morning pickup, and tiny icicles clung to the mailbox like glass fangs. Ellie stood in her kitchen, stirring cocoa on the stove the old-fashioned way. Milk, not water, a dash of cinnamon, no shortcuts. She carried her mug to the armchair by the window and sat slowly, savoring the heat in her palms and the stillness around her. It was the first time in weeks she didn't feel like she had to brace herself before checking her phone. The calm lasted 3 sips. Her phone buzzed. Once, then again. She set down the cocoa and picked up the phone, half expecting another tirade. Instead, there was a message from Monica. No greeting, no explanation. Saw the new property records. Bold move. Is this what family means to you now? A second message followed, almost instantly. Hope the nursing home you end up in has beige walls to match your little kingdom. Ellie locked the screen and set the phone face down. Her cocoa was still warm, but it didn't quite taste the same anymore. A minute later, the phone buzzed again. Another text. Jason says we need to talk, but if you think you're hurting us, you're not. We always land on our feet. She didn't reply. Instead, she picked up a yellow notepad from the end table and jotted down a line across the top. Final wishes. No contact policy post-mortem. Then she underlined it. That evening, Harvey stopped by with 2 bags of salt and a fresh snow shovel slung over his shoulder. Saw your walkway getting slick, he said, stepping inside and stomping the snow from his boots. Brought backup. You didn't have to, Ellie said, already smiling. I know, he said. That's why I did. As he leaned the shovel against the wall, he glanced at her fireplace mantel, the only place in the house that still held framed family photos. A younger Jason stood grinning beside a Christmas tree, cheeks puffed out with marshmallows, arms flung around Ellie's shoulders. Harvey looked at the photo, then back at her. They'll get nothing, he said, except maybe this old shovel if they show up on a snow day. Ellie chuckled softly, and not even that without proper ID. The snow outside had turned to a slow, persistent drizzle, turning the front walkway into slush and making the bare tree branches glisten like old silver. Ellie sat by the fireplace, the same armchair, the same cocoa mug, though this time she hadn't bothered to warm it up again. The house was still, too still, as if it sensed what was coming. Then came the slam of a car door, followed by hurried steps on the porch, then the doorbell. Twice in a row, with the kind of aggression that wasn't just impatience. It was ownership, entitlement. Ellie stood, smoothed the front of her cardigan, and opened the door without ceremony. Jason stormed past her before she could speak, trailing melted snow and misplaced fury. Monica followed a few steps behind, closing her umbrella too late and shaking it in the entry like it was her mother-in-law's fault the weather had turned. Jason didn't wait. We need to talk, he said, spinning to face her in the living room. His hair was damp, his coat unbuttoned, and there was a glint in his eyes that hadn't been there in weeks. Not fear, not even guilt. Frustration. He looked like a man losing ground in a battle he thought he had already won. Ellie folded her hands. Apparently. Monica stayed near the door, arms crossed. You've made a mess, Ellie, she said, her voice clipped. You've drawn lines you can't erase. You're being stubborn when you should be thinking about legacy, about family. Jason stepped forward. We saw the records, the trust, the removals. What the hell were you thinking? You didn't even talk to us. I didn't need your permission, Ellie said, her voice calm but carrying. It's my house, my money, my name on every line you thought you could rewrite. Jason's jaw tensed. We need to know what's ours, what we're still entitled to. She looked him square in the eye. Nothing of mine is yours. There was a silence. Heavy, real. Monica let out a sharp laugh, humorless. Wow, so this is where we are now? After everything? The Christmases we hosted, the kids you barely see, the emergencies we bailed you out of? Ellie tilted her head. You mean the leftovers you reheated for show? The grandkids who stopped sending cards after you decided I was just overhead? Or the time Jason took $8,000 from my account while I was recovering from surgery? Jason's face colored, but he didn't deny it. Monica waved a hand dismissively. We've all borrowed from family. It's what people do when they're connected. Ellie stepped forward, her voice low now, intimate. Taking without asking isn't borrowing. It's theft. Jason's voice cracked. You're cutting us out. No, she said. You did that part all on your own. The front door creaked again. Harvey walked in, shaking snow from his jacket and wiping his boots with practiced ease. He paused just long enough to take in the scene. Jason standing stiff, Monica seething, Ellie composed. "Didn't realize there was a town hall meeting today," he said, stepping fully inside. "Should have brought an agenda." Jason rolled his eyes. "Of course, you're part of this now." Harvey dropped his gloves on the radiator and looked Jason dead in the eye. "If by this you mean making sure your mother isn't robbed blind by her own son, then yes, I'm very much part of it." Monica turned her scorn toward him. "You have no idea how hard we've worked to support her." Harvey raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you call it? Support? Because from where I'm standing, it looks a hell of a lot like looting." Jason stepped forward again, trying to reclaim ground. "Look, we're not here to fight. We just want transparency. We want to understand where things stand, financially." Ellie walked to the mantel, took down a single photo, one of Jason in high school, arms slung over her shoulders at a track meet. She looked at it a long time before setting it face down. "You don't need to understand anymore," she said softly. "That right expired the moment you treated me like a walking bank account with a microwave." The glow from the neon open sign reflected faintly off the icy parking lot outside. Inside, the bowling alley cafe was half lit and half empty, quiet except for the hum of the soda machine and the occasional squeal of polished shoes on slick tile. Ellie sat in her usual booth, the one furthest from the main lanes, sipping from a steaming mug of cider. It was her third this winter, and somehow it still tasted like something worth celebrating. Harvey sat across from her, his coat draped over the back of the booth, his hands wrapped around his own mug like it held more than just heat. Maya's voice came in clearly over speakerphone, though she kept it low enough to avoid attention. "They tried to access the joint account again this morning. Jason called in, asked for a temporary PIN reset." Ellie's face didn't change, but her shoulders slackened slightly. "You denied him?" "Of course," Maya replied. "I flagged it instantly. Claire's authorization packet was airtight. He didn't even try to hide the request. Just said, 'My mother must have hit the wrong button again.' Real casual." Ellie shook her head and let out a long breath. "Thank you. I mean that." "I told you I'd keep watch," Maya said. "And it's holding. No access granted. Nothing's moved." Ellie clicked off speaker and ended the call with a quiet, "Talk soon." She set the phone aside and wrapped both hands around her cider mug, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. Harvey leaned back and let out a low chuckle. "So let me get this straight. They walked into your house, demanded a cut of your life, and then had the gall to try and take it anyway?" Ellie took a sip before replying. "They thought they could shake the tree and count on the fruit falling right into their hands." "Well," Harvey said, raising his mug in salute, "cheers to branches that don't break." She smiled softly and clinked her mug against his. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows gently. The forecast had promised more snow overnight. Ellie found herself hoping for it. The hush it brought. The way it softened the world and made everything feel further away. Her phone buzzed again. Harvey watched as she checked the screen, his expression already hardening. "Jason." The message was longer than usual. "You're ruining our future. I hope you understand that. This money wasn't just yours. It was meant to support all of us. If you can't be reasoned with, we'll have no choice but to protect what's ours." Ellie read it through twice, then locked her screen and set it down, face up. Harvey exhaled sharply. "He's not even pretending anymore." "No," Ellie said, "and I think that's the most honest thing he's done in years." A few minutes passed in silence. Ellie finished her cider. Harvey offered her another slice of pie, but she declined. Instead, she just sat quietly, watching the snow begin to fall again beyond the windows. Then her phone buzzed once more. She didn't pick it up this time. She could already guess the tone. Harvey leaned across the table. "You want me to guess who it is?" "Take a wild one," she murmured. The screen lit up, Monica's name, and beneath it, a new social media post preview. "Funny how the elderly think hoarding money is wisdom. All it really does is destroy families." Ellie didn't even bother opening it. She slid the phone into her purse and looked out the window instead. The flakes were getting heavier now. Good. Let them pile up. Let the whole world quiet itself beneath a thick white blanket and give her the space to breathe. The next morning, the phone rang just after sunrise. Ellie was at the kitchen table, slicing grapefruit and making toast, still in her robe. She picked up on the second ring. Claire's voice came through, steady but urgent. "Ellie, I just got a notice from the probate clerk's office." Ellie froze, butter knife hovering above a slice of rye. Claire continued. "Jason's filed an early-stage claim to contest the trust. It's not a lawsuit yet, but it's a formal challenge. He's trying to force a hearing." Ellie said nothing for a long moment. She sat slowly, the air suddenly heavier in the room. "I thought we were locked down." "We are," Claire said. "But this tells me something else. He's not going to let go quietly. And he's lawyered up." Ellie sat across from Claire in the same leather chair she'd occupied weeks earlier, but the room felt different now. Not colder, just tighter, like something invisible had crept into the corners since their last meeting. The scanned copy of Jason's probate claim lay between them on the desk, its bland legal formatting at odds with the fury behind it. "He thinks a petition like this will rattle you," Claire said, tapping the corner of the printout with a pen. "It's performative, Ellie. The trust is airtight. There are no holes." Ellie didn't speak at first. She simply looked at the document again, then leaned back slowly, hands folded in her lap. "So it's bluffing." Claire's expression remained composed. "It's a legal tap on the shoulder, hoping you'll panic and make a mistake. He's hoping you'll revoke the trust voluntarily or worse, settle with him privately. And if I don't? Then it dies on the clerk's desk, paper without teeth." Ellie nodded, though her jaw stayed tense. "He always did hate losing quietly." Claire gave a faint smile. "So do I." Later that afternoon, Harvey met Ellie on her front porch, bundled in a parka zipped to the neck, his cheeks flushed from the cold. "You're holding up better than I expected," he said as she handed him a cup of hot cider. Ellie shrugged. It's amazing what a woman can do when she stops asking permission to be angry. They sat on the porch swing as snow began falling again, light and clean. Harvey took a sip, grimaced playfully. "Still put cinnamon in this, huh? Always tastes like Christmas and regret." She laughed under her breath, the sound brief but genuine. "So this hearing?" he said after a moment. "Is it going anywhere?" "No," Ellie replied. "Claire says it's all bark." Harvey snorted. "Well, good, because I was about to offer to hit Jason with a snowball from across state lines." "I'd pay to see that." "You wouldn't have to. I'd do it for sport." Ellie made a quiet stop by the credit union before heading home. The branch was mostly empty, save for a teenager in earbuds and a man arguing with a teller over overdraft fees. Maya waved her back to her office without a word. "Just wanted to double-check everything," Ellie said as she removed her gloves. "I know Claire says we're good, but—" "I get it," Maya said, already pulling up her records. "We're still locked in. No flags, no outside activity. All assets are under trust control. The only name on the accounts is yours." Ellie let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Maya turned her screen toward her. "And just so you know, we've flagged Jason's number in our internal system. If he so much as calls pretending to be your financial advisor, I get a direct alert." Ellie smiled. "You're worth your weight in gold." Maya leaned back, arms folded. "I just don't like bullies in good suits." That night back home, Ellie sat curled in her living room, fire crackling, robe wrapped tight. The file Claire had given her sat untouched on the coffee table, still there, still ready, but no longer feeling like an alarm bell, just a backup plan. The calm didn't last. Her phone buzzed once, then again, then a third time. She picked it up and scrolled. "Jason, you're not going to win. I will bury you in paperwork. You're forcing me into this. Don't say I didn't give you a chance to settle." She didn't reply. Instead, she turned the volume down, set the phone face down, and returned her gaze to the flames. They danced slowly, like they had all the time in the world. The fourth buzz came seconds later. Monica. New post. "When parents turn greedy, don't blame the kids for cutting them off. Family loyalty is a two-way street." Ellie read the preview, deleted the notification, and didn't bother logging in to see the comments. She'd stopped wondering what people thought the moment Jason tried to reset her bank PIN and lie about it. She wasn't a profile to defend. She was a woman reclaiming what had always been hers. The city outside was glazed in fresh snow, the sidewalks dusted like powdered sugar, and the lake rimmed with brittle ice. Ellie stepped into Claire's office with her boots still slightly damp, brushing flakes from her wool coat. The air inside smelled faintly of paper, printer ink, and the citrus hand lotion Claire always kept on her desk. Claire looked up as Ellie entered and gave her a nod, not formal but familiar. "Morning?" she said, already closing the folder she'd been reading. "I had a feeling you'd come in today." Ellie set her bag down and eased into the leather chair without waiting to be asked. "I want to strengthen the trust, fortify it, whatever word lawyers use when they mean, make it bulletproof." Claire folded her hands. "Go on." "He's not stopping," Ellie said, "and I don't expect him to. The probate notice might have been noise, but it was calculated. I want everything locked down so tightly that even if he finds some lawyer desperate enough to file a motion in crayon, it won't matter." Claire pulled a clean file folder from her drawer, opened it, and began writing as Ellie spoke. "And I want Harvey named as successor trustee," Ellie continued. "If anything happens to me, stroke, accident, even just old age doing its thing, he takes over. No court review, no loopholes." Claire nodded, her pen still moving. "He's already listed as secondary executor on the revocable trust. We'll add a formal clause for successor control and grant him full authority upon your incapacitation. That shuts down 90% of challenges." Ellie leaned back, arms crossed. "What about the other 10? "We'll include a no-contest clause. If Jason or Monica tries to sue, they're automatically disqualified from receiving anything. The courts will see it as an intentional disruption of estate plans. That usually scares off the vultures." Ellie allowed herself the smallest smile. "Good." They worked in tandem after that, Claire reading aloud, Ellie listening carefully and signing each new page with deliberate clarity. There was no hesitation in her strokes now, no nerves. Just decision. When the last signature dried, Claire stood and walked to the scanner by the window. The pages slid through in rhythmic, satisfying clicks. Ellie stood as well, watching the process with a kind of reverence. It wasn't just paperwork, it was armor. For once, the system was on her side. As the final document fed through, Claire turned. "That's it. The trust is now reinforced and active. You're shielded from probate challenges, bank tampering, and trustee interference. If Jason tries again, he'll be playing chess on a board you already walked away from." Ellie exhaled, not with exhaustion, but with certainty. Claire gestured toward the coat rack. "Now, if you'd like to step into the snow with a clean conscience, I'll walk you out." They stepped out onto the sidewalk together. The cold hit like a soft slap, sharp but bracing. Cleveland's lakefront skyline loomed in the distance, crisp against the bright winter sky. Claire zipped up her coat and adjusted her scarf. Ellie didn't speak, not right away. She just stood there for a moment, letting the air sting her cheeks. "It feels different now," she said finally. "What does?" "The silence." Claire tilted her head. "For weeks it felt like a warning," Ellie continued. "Now it feels like peace." They exchanged a quiet look. Two women who understood that protection wasn't just about money, it was about boundaries, about dignity. "You're not just secure, Ellie," Claire said. "You're free." That evening, Ellie lit a candle on her kitchen table. Not for ceremony, not for mood, but just because it was hers. The whole house, quiet and clean and warm, had stopped holding echoes of tension. It had become her own again. Harvey arrived an hour later, carrying 2 white bakery boxes tied with string. "What's this?" Ellie asked, opening the first one to find a fresh peach cobbler and a chocolate chess pie. "Celebration desserts?" he said, grinning. "I figured today called for a proper sugar high." She laughed, a full, bright sound, and motioned for him to sit. "You're officially my trustee now. You're not allowed to let me overdose on sugar." "That's not in the fine print," Harvey replied, already reaching for plates. The snow had melted down to a stubborn crust along the sidewalk edges, leaving behind patches of slush and forgotten salt. But inside Ellie's home, everything was in order. The scent of lemon polish lingered from her morning wipe down of the kitchen counters, and classical piano played softly on the old radio. Nothing dramatic, just calm and deliberate, like everything she'd become lately. Ellie sat at her dining table, reviewing a stack of paperwork with a blue ink pen and a small brass letter opener. The forms were crisp, each line read carefully, each figure checked against her own records. She didn't rush. There was no one to impress, and no reason to second-guess herself anymore. She paused only once, when she got to the page confirming the transfer to her new savings plan. High yield, limited access, named solely under Eleanor Grant, no cosigners, no digital links. Her initials filled the bottom of the page, looping in the same firm script she used to sign discharge forms at the hospital. The kind of handwriting that left no room for confusion. Harvey arrived just as she was sealing the envelope. "Hope I'm not interrupting an international wire transfer," he said as he stepped in, stomping snow from his boots. "Only transferring power," Ellie replied, handing him a cup of cocoa she'd already poured. He took a sip and immediately raised his eyebrows. "You spiked this?" "No," she said, sitting across from him. "But I did something else you'll like." She slid the receipt for her charitable donation across the table, neatly folded, signed, and dated. Harvey read it twice. "Cleveland Clinic Foundation," he murmured, glancing at the figure. "That's a generous chunk of change." "I was a nurse for 38 years, Ellie said, tucking her hands around her cocoa. "They covered my surgeries, gave me 2 more decades of movement, and never sent a bill I couldn't manage. I figured it was time to give something back, before Jason tried to claim it with a fake tear and a lawyer in tow." Harvey leaned back, smiling wide now. "That's one hell of a middle finger. Classy, clean, and untouchable." "I'm not giving him a war to win," Ellie said. "Just a locked gate and nothing to rattle." They clinked mugs like it was champagne. The doorbell rang that afternoon, just as the sky turned that soft, pale gray that always meant lake-effect snow was returning. Ellie answered to find Maya standing on the porch, cheeks flushed from the wind, and a manila envelope tucked under her arm. "Everything's finalized," Maya said, stepping inside. "New account, separate from the trust, no shared links. We also flagged any incoming requests with Jason's name for the next 12 months. Ellie smiled and waved her into the kitchen. "Would you like a warm-up?" "I'd kill for coffee," Maya replied, removing her gloves. "I had to explain to one of our tellers this morning why we don't just give out access if someone's family. She's 22 and thinks elder abuse is just a headline." Ellie poured 2 mugs. Well, now she knows it's a business model. They laughed quietly over the steam rising from their drinks. Maya handed over the envelope. "And here's your copy of the savings plan. You'll earn more than your old account, and best of all, it's invisible to anyone not legally entitled to see it, which is exactly no one." Ellie accepted the envelope with both hands. "Thank you, Maya. I'm grateful." "No," Maya said, finishing her coffee. "You're just finally being treated with the same precision and respect you gave to everyone else your whole career." That evening, Ellie sat by the fire, journal open, the air still but not heavy. She'd written only 1 sentence all day, and it sat at the top of the page like a title she wasn't ready to follow up on. "I gave what mattered to someone who earned it, and not a penny more." She set the journal aside and closed her eyes, letting the fire warm her tired feet. The phone buzzed once, then again. She didn't look, but the third buzz came with a preview that lit the entire screen. Jason Grant. Public post. "Inheritance thieves should rot, and so should the snakes who help them." She let the screen fade. No reply, no screenshot, no call to Claire, only stillness. The morning air was sharp enough to bite as Ellie stepped onto her porch to bring in the newspaper, one of the few rituals she hadn't given up. The front yard was crusted in last night's frost, the sun only now beginning to melt its edges into shimmer. She tucked the paper under her arm and stepped back inside, the door clicking shut behind her with a sense of finality she didn't question. The fire from the night before had long cooled, but the house still held its warmth, not just from the furnace but from something steadier. Resilience. The phone rang just as she was measuring out coffee grounds. It wasn't Claire. It wasn't Maya. It was Harvey. "Monica's packing bags," he said without greeting. Ellie paused mid-pour. You're sure? Neighbors saw her hauling boxes into the back of her Range Rover, 2 suitcases, 1 set of golf clubs, and a whole lot of yelling on the front lawn. Jason tried to chase her down in socks. Ellie didn't smile, but she exhaled slowly. I guess the legacy she thought she married into came up short. I think Jason's finally realizing you can't cash in on charm. Ellie stirred her coffee, quiet for a beat. And the house? Pre-foreclosure status, Harvey replied. Turns out his startup was bleeding worse than your accounts ever were. The second call came just after noon. Her phone buzzed once, twice, then a third time, persistent, like a child at a locked door. Jason. She didn't answer. The fourth ring came immediately, and this time she let it connect. She said nothing. Jason's voice came through, brittle, the arrogance stripped clean. Mom, listen, I know you're angry. I know we messed up, but Monica's gone and I don't have anywhere to go. He faltered. I need help. Just for a little while. Please. We're family. Ellie said nothing. She didn't cry. She didn't clench her fists. She simply hung up. That afternoon, a small cream envelope arrived in her mailbox. No stamp, hand-delivered. It was from the Cleveland Women's Shelter. Inside, a short-typed note. Dear Ms. Grant, your anonymous donation helped cover a month of housing for 3 mothers and their children. One of them asked us to say thank you, so we are. With gratitude, CWS. There was no photo, no return address, just a signature and a logo at the bottom. Ellie read the note 3 times before folding it neatly and placing it inside her journal. Then she lit a candle, not out of grief, not even out of celebration, just something small and good to balance the day. Harvey showed up around 5 with his usual weather-beaten grin and 2 styrofoam cups of cider. House still yours? He asked, holding one out to her. Verified this morning, Ellie said, accepting it. They clinked the rims together gently. To what? She asked. Harvey thought for a beat. To leftovers, he said finally. The kind that count. She smiled and took a sip. The warmth hit her throat just right. They didn't talk much after that. Just sat on the porch, watching the last light fall across the neighborhood, silent in a way that didn't feel empty. The knock came just after dark. 3 short taps. Not urgent, not timid either. Ellie opened the door. Jason stood on the porch, suitcase in one hand, duffel in the other. His hair was unwashed, his coat mismatched with the rest of his clothes, and his eyes, bloodshot and wet, could barely meet hers. I didn't know where else to go, he said. Voice cracked open. I messed up. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but I don't have anyone left. The wind picked up behind him, sharp and cold. His shoulders were trembling. Whether it was shame or just the chill, Ellie couldn't say. She looked at him a long time and said nothing. Not yet. The door stayed open for 3 seconds longer than it needed to. Long enough for Jason to feel the weight of it, Ellie's silence, her steady breath, her gaze scanning the pieces of what was left of him. Then she stepped aside. Not in welcome, not in forgiveness. Just emotion. A choice. One small space made available. Jason stepped in, the duffel sliding off his shoulder and landing with a muffled thud on the mat. He didn't take off his coat, just stood there for a moment, arms stiff at his sides. Ellie shut the door behind him and walked back to the kitchen without a word. The tea kettle was already on the stove, hissing quietly as it warmed. Jason followed, slower now. His steps were hesitant, like he was moving through someone else's house. Maybe he was. They sat in silence while the kettle came to a boil. When Ellie finally poured the water into 2 chipped ceramic mugs, she pushed one across the table without looking at him. Jason wrapped his hands around it but didn't drink. She left, he said finally. Ellie didn't respond. She just stirred honey into her own tea. She said I was pathetic. He continued, voice low. Said she didn't sign up for a life with nothing in it but court fees and frozen assets. She packed up everything that wasn't nailed down, even took the espresso machine. Who does that? Ellie sipped. No comment. Jason's eyes were glassy. Not from tears, just the kind of hollow that follows when pride has nowhere else to land. I tried to fix it. I thought if I just got back what I was owed, maybe... Owed? Ellie finally said, her voice gentle but sharp enough to sting. Jason looked down. That's not what I meant. It's what you said. He swallowed hard. I shouldn't have taken her side. Not like that. Not against you. The wind pressed against the windows again. Ellie didn't argue. She didn't comfort either. She simply waited. Jason's shoulders slumped. You were right, about all of it. I wanted the house, the money. I thought it meant safety or control. I don't know. But now, he trailed off, eyes on the mug like it might hold the words he couldn't find. I'm not here to ask for anything, he said. Just, what? Ellie asked softly. Just what, Jason? He met her eyes finally. Just, not to be alone. The kettle let out one last hiss before going still. Ellie stood and turned to the counter. She ladled soup from a pot she'd made that afternoon, lentil and sausage, something hearty enough to stretch over a few days. 2 bowls, 2 spoons, no fanfare. As she set his bowl down, she spoke without looking at him. I won't rewrite the trust. I won't change the paperwork. You won't get another $1 from me. Not now, not later. I know, he said quickly. That's not why I came. She sat. They ate in silence, only the occasional clink of silverware and the soft crackle of the baseboard heater filling the space between them. Halfway through, there was a knock at the door. Jason tensed, halfway rising, but Ellie held up a hand. It's just Harvey, she said, already standing. Sure enough, Harvey stood on the porch, bundled up and holding a snow shovel in one hand. Heard your walkway's a mess, he said. Then he spotted Jason through the front window. Ah, thought I heard something slimy dragging across the concrete. Ellie didn't smile, but her eyes flickered. Be nice. I'll think about it. She pulled on her coat and stepped out to join him. They stood by the porch steps, breath fogging in the crisp night air, while Jason watched them from inside. You okay? Harvey asked, still gripping the shovel like he meant it. Ellie nodded. He's broken, but I don't trust broken things just because they're quiet. Harvey sighed. You want him to stay? I want him to learn something, she said. Whether he gets to stay depends on that. Harvey looked back through the window. Jason had his head in his hands now, elbows on the table like a kid sent to the principal's office. He can help with the walk, Harvey said. I could use the labor. Then let him earn the warmth, Ellie said, 1 shovel at a time. They re-entered the house. Ellie handed Jason a pair of gloves without a word. Jason looked up, eyes searching hers. She simply said, Go help him. Jason nodded, stood, and followed Harvey out into the snow. Ellie sat back at the kitchen table alone, sipping the last of her soup, while the sound of shovels scraping against pavement filled the air like a rhythm she could live with. But when she turned to glance at the window, Jason was standing still, watching her through the glass, not moving, shovel in hand. And the look in his eyes wasn't regret. It was something else, something still unsettled. The snow had returned overnight, just enough to sugarcoat the world in white again. From Ellie's kitchen window, the backyard looked like something out of a forgotten postcard, still, bright, and waiting. She stirred gravy on the stovetop, letting the scent of roasted garlic and thyme fill the house. There were pies cooling on the windowsill, 2 casseroles wrapped in foil, and a slow cooker humming low by the pantry. Nothing extravagant, but every bite would be warm, and no one had brought leftovers. At 5 sharp, the doorbell rang. Harvey was first through the door, cheeks flushed red from the cold, carrying 2 bottles of sparkling cider under one arm and wearing the same too large sweater he'd accidentally shrunk in '09. Behind him came Clara, the waitress from the bowling alley cafe, carrying a bakery box tied with red twine, and behind her, 2 of the Monday Night League guys, Paul and Mike, already arguing over who'd cheat worse at cards later. Smells like you hired someone, Harvey said, hanging his coat. Ellie gave him a look. Just because it's hot doesn't mean it's catered. Clara lifted the bakery box high. Got your message, made both pies, 1 cherry, 1 chess. You didn't have to, Ellie said, already grinning. Clara winked. I know, that's why I did. They gathered around the long table she'd spent 2 weeks clearing and dressing, real linens, mismatched place settings, and a strand of tiny gold lights woven through the centerpiece like stardust. As they settled, a knock came at the side door. Maya stood there, cheeks pink, gloved hand raised midair. She wasn't staying, just stopping in. She handed Ellie a Christmas card, envelope sealed with a silver sticker. Didn't want to risk the mail. "Thank you," Ellie said, pulling her into a quick hug. "It's just a note," Maya whispered. "And a picture of my daughter. She's wearing the gloves you sent." "You mean the ones she tried to lose, so I'd knit her another pair?" Maya laughed. Guilty. Then she was gone, back to her car and her family, leaving Ellie holding the envelope like a second cup of warmth. Inside, laughter had already started. Paul spilled cider on the tablecloth. Mike declared war over poker chips before the turkey even landed. Harvey played bartender with no liquor, and Clara quietly replaced Ellie's water with cider when she wasn't looking. They passed plates, ladled gravy, and fought over who got the crustiest edge of the cornbread bake. Somewhere between the second round of rolls and Clara's pie unveiling, Ellie slipped into the kitchen alone to collect herself. On the counter sat another envelope, cream-colored, unsealed. Claire's handwriting curved elegantly across the front. Inside, just a single note. "Your legacy is secure, and more importantly, it's your own. Claire." Ellie read it twice, then folded it neatly and tucked it beside Maya's card in the drawer next to the utensils. No need to display it. She already knew. Back at the table, someone told a story about a league night gone wrong. Harvey swore a pin had moved mid-air, and everyone was mid-laugh when Ellie paused, hand wrapped around her cider glass. For the first time in months, she wasn't calculating, not reviewing documents, not bracing for another call, not waiting to be fought. She was present, surrounded by people who had chosen her not for what she could give, but simply for who she was when everything else had been stripped away. No Monica, no Jason, no lawyers, no drama, just warmth. She lifted her glass for a quiet toast. Nothing formal, just a lift, a look, and a smile, and Harvey met it across the table with a nod. The table buzzed with small jokes and second servings. And in that soft, perfect moment, Ellie thought not of the Christmas dinners where she'd been handed cold scraps, nor the years she'd stayed quiet for the sake of politeness. She thought of the ones who'd tried to rewrite her story, and how she'd outwritten them with ink, fire, and silence. She sat back in her chair, letting the room wash over her, and as she reached for a second slice of Clara's cherry pie, she smiled to herself, slow, full, free. They laughed at cold leftovers. Yet I served them frozen accounts and feasted on freedom.